again all. Okay, we'll start now with the Bratton Ironworks. And this is an illustrated record by Dennis Gardner, published in 2016. Bratton was at one time a hive of industry, with several woolen mills along the stream and occupying a prominent position in the centre of the village, where the factory buildings of R&J Reeves and Son were situated. The site is now the village green, and the only obvious reminder of the firm is a commemorative plaque unveiled in 1993 by Kathleen Reeves. The works dominated the village, and Reeves became the largest employer in the area. Bratton was ideally suited to serve the needs of farmers on Salisbury Plain, sheep farming. And in the vale to the north, which was arable, the firm made a tremendous variety of agricultural implements and machinery, almost entirely from raw materials. The largest machine was the elevator, for raising straw and hay onto a haystack, and it could be folded for travelling. It was designed by Henry Reeves in 1896. After the Second World War, Reeves were not able to compete with the larger international firms and never really updated their products. The elevators were still being built in the early 1950s to the original design. Final receivership was in 1970, and the whole works was demolished in 1973. Those with sharp eyes can still find Reeves items around. Some road drain gratings, cast iron nameplates, and a few preserved implements in gardens. We also have Reeves to thank for the installation in 1904 of a gas main from Westbury. Adjoining the fitting shop on the east side were the boiler house and engine house. The earliest steam engine was installed by 1849, possibly made by Brown and May at Devizes. A new steam engine was supplied in 1908 from this firm. In 1904, as we've heard, a gas main was laid from Westbury, with Reeves guaranteeing a good requirement for gas, as well as providing gas lighting for the village. It has been said that a gas-powered engine was purchased by Reeves in 1905, possibly to power the sawmill. Converting tree trunks into sawn timber would previously have been laborious, using the saw pit and cutting by hand. Later, all machinery was electrically powered through a three-phase system. Adjoining the boiler house and engine house, with a tall chimney between them, was the foundry, with its external furnaces. The spoked wheel and geared wheel in the foundry are wooden patterns for the advanced elevator components, and the sand mould in the centre, drag on the floor and cope above, poured through the holes above, which were the runner and the riser. That's like quite a few, you have to have quite a few associated buildings, don't you, with these works? The large wooden crane would be used to bring the crucible of the molten iron from the furnace to the required position above the moulding box. The patterns used in the sand moulds would have been made in the carpenter's shop and were kept in the pattern stall. The pattern makers would have been highly skilled woodworkers. In particular, the patterns needed to be slightly larger than the finished casting to allow for stretch when cooling. Any surplus metal left on the castings would be removed in the fettling shop next to the pattern stall. Castings were then stored mostly on the second floor of the building, next to the bonding ring and fitting shop. The sawmill was situated on the northern part of the site, beyond the pattern stall and fettling shop, and surrounded by the timber drying sheds. There was the large rack saw that would be used to render tree trunks into planks. The tree trunks would be brought into the shop on trucks, which ran on the light railway, lifted onto the runners, and fed into the large circular saw seen at the far end of the rack. This was powered by a 35 HP electric motor in the latter days of operation. By 1815, Reeves plows were becoming well known, but they had wooden frames and wrought iron working parts. It was in 1847 that foundry equipment was purchased, and the ability to cast complex shapes in iron would have transformed the kind of work now possible. Maybe some transitional ploughs were made, with some cast wooden components, especially the wheels, which would have been difficult to fabricate in wrought iron. In 1845, 28 wooden ploughs were made, but in 1849, 66 ploughs were made and only 2 wooden ploughs. So we can see how these innovations were really taking off. In 1849, Thomas Pepler Reeves died, and the sons Robert, carpenter, and John, the smith, continued the business at R&J Reeves. A steam engine was installed, primarily to drive the machinery in the fitting shop. With the acquisition of the top or upper yard on the south side of the main road, Reeves were now set up to expand their range of implements. They gained a licence to make Chandler's patent liquid manure distributor and drill, and patented a number of improvements to these. In 1851, they exhibited at the Great Exhibition in the Crystal Palace, winning a medal for these products, a fantastic achievement. Plows were, of course, very important implements for the arable farmer, and Reeves made quite a selection. A Reeves light general purpose plough was originally owned by Jimmy Stokes of Redlands Farm, on the outskirts of Bratton, with land either side of the railway. It has now been restored and repainted in the traditional Reeves colours of red and light blue. Reeves had a reputation for being always innovative, for instance, in their patented modification for the Chandler's implements. They suggested additions to ploughs in order to make them do two jobs at the same time, making for more efficient working on the farm. Reeves also produced a multi-purpose implement, somewhat similar in appearance to the plough. This was the two-row horse hoe, which could have other attachments fitted to the frame instead of the hoe blades, notably a ridging body for earthing up potatoes and a potato raiser. The firm acquired a reputation for turning its hand to making or mending almost anything. During the harvest season in particular, Reeves men would be all around the countryside tinkering with machinery in situ, while the works hours were spent, often uneconomically, trying to make something go. They attended to pumps and wells, put in water supplies and heating apparatus, built greenhouses, soldered kettles and pans, made almost any kind of domestic equipment to specification, even cages for parrots. They made coffins for the village and acted as undertakers. In a 19th century ledger, we find the unusual entry, 2 man's time only, clearing bats from belfry, using gas, 7 shillings. Robert Reeves was even willing to turn architect and builder. He built cottages at Grant's Farm and the Jubilee Hall, out of material from the old infant school. He directed the building of the Ashton Chapel, and after him his son Henry did the same for the Cheverell Chapel. In the summer of 1916, Reeves repaired one of the early experimental army tanks that had broken down during road tests in the area. Henry Reeves, 1850 to 1926, was the last in the family line to be really involved in the engineering development side of the ironworks. In 1873, aged 23, he patented improvements to an elevator designed by William Andrews of Melksham, and Reeves built these elevators under licence. Between 1871 and 1898, 305 of these were made at Bratton. In 1957, the firm went into receivership. The foundry was closed, the workforce reduced, mainly from the carpenter's shop and the foundry, and the upper yard was sold, to eventually be rebuilt as Reeves' garage. By 1959, creditors were paid in full and the firm continued to operate, but in 1970 it went into receivership for the second time. This really was the end, and the firm closed. The contents were auctioned on 12th of November 1970. Following the closure, some attempts were made to start up smaller companies on the site. Bratton Engineering was formed by Alan Powell and Hugh Dunsterville, another Reeves director, and Gerald Humphrey, with the intention of running a repair service for agricultural and other machinery with a sales outlet for welding. Again, the business was not successful. So that was the end of Reeves. Actually, interestingly enough, when we did this extract at the History Centre, we got out some material which were sort of ledgers and things. We do hold some ledgers for Reeves at the History Centre. Amazingly enough, one of the reading group attendees had actually worked at Reeves many years ago and remembers it well. So that was lovely to hear some of his thoughts on Reeves from his general personal experience too. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this session. Thank you.